Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our Friday panel on the Smith government preparing to legislate teachers back to work. But first, municipal elections fallout.
When you get only 30% turnout, that speaks to, a cynicism amongst the electorate about, whether it's worth voting, whether a vote really changes things.
The runner-up there in Edmonton's mayoral race, calling for an independent third-party audit of election results. It comes in the wake of voter frustrations over lengthy waits to cast ballots and delayed results. And joining us now for perspective on how municipal elections played out across the province this week is Drew Westwater, an elections management consultant and former Deputy Chief Electoral Officer with Elections Alberta. Mr. Westwater, good to see you, sir.
Good to hang you. Good to talk to you too, Michael.
All right. Well, this was the first set of elections to implement new rules legislated by the provincial government well over a year ago. How do you feel municipalities fared here?
Generally, overall, across Alberta, they dealt with the new legislation as best they could, given the new changes that impacted the voting experience for electors across Alberta based on the number of electors in that jurisdiction and how many polls there were. There were obviously some issues in Edmonton and Calgary that were well documented and reported on. Clearly, there were lineups in the polls created by the new legislation. That's not surprising. We've always had lineups in the polls at elections on election day. Just a question of how long you waited in line and whether you went at supper time or 2 p.m. Number of the legislative changes impacted on that greatly. In addition to that, the postal strike by Canada Post affected the ability to send out voter notification cards to electors, which traditionally you always get in the mail. And on those would have barcodes telling electors you're on the voters list. Come and bring this to the poll with you. We'll get you in and out of there in no time because you're on the register already. The changes made by the government changed all that. Unfortunately, there were no voter cards to come in with the polls because of the voter strike. As a result of that, electors had to come into the polls on the manual system. They had to identify themselves. They had to be looked up in the register manually to find their name and address. Then they also had to fill out a statement of qualification of elector, adding their name and their address to the form itself. That takes time. Not everybody reads and writes English as a first language or reads and writes well. That takes time, and each elector behind them waiting in line is waiting for them to do that before they get their ballots and vote. In addition to that, with the changes made, because there's no voting machines anymore, in Edmonton, you got 4 separate ballots. There are 3 anyway. You got a mayor's ballot, and then you get a councillor's ballot, and then you get a school board ballot, and those had to be handed out. And that delayed the time of the elector at the voting desk every day for each elector. So what was usually a 1 or 2 minute exercise became a 5 or 6 minute exercise for each elector, tripled the time everybody elected was at the desk.
It really does compound the situation. Okay, so Dan Williams, the Minister of Municipal Affairs this week, defending the province's changes to legislation, also calls the hand counting of ballots the gold standard. How necessary was it for the provincial government to ban the use of vote tabulators?
How necessary was it? The provincial government felt it was necessary. Clearly, vote tabulators have been used extensively across Canada since 1988 at both the municipal and provincial levels. They're still used today in municipalities across Canada at the municipal and provincial levels. They're accurate. Their integrity is beyond question. The accuracy and integrity of the systems have been proven in recounts over the years. There's been no issues with voting tabulators reported by election officials, both municipally or provincially, to Alberta legislature in any of their reports. There was no outcry from the hue and cry from the general public about dissatisfaction with the voting machines. So there was nothing there that I was aware of when the changes were made to demonstrate there was a need to ban the use of voting machines, which are still used throughout Canada in most other jurisdictions already.
Okay, so in then using hand counting of ballots, could there have been more done by the province to help municipalities navigate the new process?
Well, they changed the legislation. We had manual counting of ballots before voting machines came in 1988. and they were used for hundreds of years, since Confederation. The process for doing that was changed somewhat. In the old days, you had a maximum of 450 electors per poll for each voting station, and you had a DRO and a poll clerk at each voting station. And that allowed, if you had a 30% turnout, they'd counting a maximum of 150 ballots for mayor, 150 ballots for councillors, and even less for the school trustees. Today, because the voting has changed so much over the years and efficiencies have been made with vote tabulators, they're not restricted to 450 elector per polling subdivision. Change is not in effect. The larger polls with more electors going to it, there's only usually one elector, a DRO or election official for each voting station, because they have automated systems to count for the register itself now. So there's fewer people in the polls. There's fewer people available that are traditionally working the polls. Municipalities and election officials throughout Alberta made every effort to increase the number of staff they had available at the polls for manual counts. But there's a smaller pool of people available to do that today than there were previously.
We heard the clip of Tim Cartmell off the top, the runner-up in Edmonton's mayoral race. He's not disputing his loss, but he is calling for an independent third-party audit. What form of post-election analysis do you feel might be warranted here?
Well, certainly in a review of the staffing levels in each location, the policies and procedures implemented by each individual municipality by bylaw on at the close of polls, at the counting of the ballots, what happens, how they're reported, the control and maintenance of the ballot boxes themselves, whether you go to a counting center where you put additional staff on to help with the counting of the ballots, to assist in the expediency of that. Now, it's always taken time to count ballots manually across Alberta and across Canada when you do a manual system. That's why official ballots and official votes are not until today at 12 o'clock. Election day was Monday. Today's Friday. That gives the election returning officers time to review the results of election night provided by their election officials, to correct any errors that have been made in paperwork or documentation, or possible transcription of numbers or votes for each elector or for each candidate. And the time to change those, fix those, are in place before today at 12 noon. That's traditionally always been there. It just takes a little longer this time. Okay, maybe as a final question, how confident do you feel voters should be in the outcome of municipal elections moving forward, if it is that this process, this change process, is to continue? Well, I'm sure municipalities will certainly take lessons learned from their experiences this time. Now that they've run manual elections again, they haven't done that for many, many years. So this is the first time through for many of the returning officers. I'm very confident that the official results that are posted at 12 o'clock on the Friday are accurate, and the integrity of their voting process is preserved. And electors should be confident throughout Alberta that the voting system is working and working well. How we can manage the polls better and the lineups better can be improved for next time. And I'm sure the municipalities will take steps to address that.
All right. We'll have to leave it there for time, Mr. Westwater. Good to speak with you, sir. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, Michael. Have a good day.
You as well. Drew Westwater, an elections management consultant and former Deputy Chief Electoral Officer with Elections Alberta.